Okay, this is a rant which is so far unscripted, but I do have a title, which is The Poverty of Donald Trump. My assertion is that Donald Trump is the poorest person or a representative of the poorest group of people in America and in the Americas in general, and part of an embodiment of a philosophy of poor people with lots of cash and control or influence over others who are permanently poor. And let me define poverty. Destruction is poverty. To be more precise, destructive thinking and destructive attitudes are poverty. And this poverty is what inhibits them from ever being rich, from ever actually entering into true prosperity. In true prosperity, not only are you living, but you're helping other people to live better. Donald Trump isn't trying to help anybody to live better. He's trying to stop other people from living well so that he thinks then there will be more resources left for quote unquote his people to live better. But that's not how reality works. In reality, whenever you try to harm somebody else, you first harm yourself. Because the amount of energy and passion that you put into distraction is energy and passion that doesn't go into construction, creativity, enhancing, expanding, growth, development. And many people uh, in certain subsectors of the world have been basing themselves not on true growth and development, but on balance sheet growth and development, which does not correspond to the growth of life, qualities of life that we value as human beings, nor to the growth of value that anybody experiences in a subjective manner. Because many people spend money on entertainment, for example, entertainment for the Federation. The Federation is what you call the United States of America. I'm going to just call it the Federation though, because it's the Federated United States of America. And furthermore, um, it's not really an independent country as it thinks that it is. Besides the fact that people who have influence due to being um, in control of lots of people through employment contracts and also lots of cash through being in a situation where they're quote unquote too big to fail. Again, it has to do with employment contracts. The more people you employ, the more, not necessarily directly votes you can control, but the more impact you can have on society. And therefore, you can use that as a blunt instrument to leverage the government into doing what you want. Because in order to protect the common society, the government has to project jobs which already exist, and in order to protect jobs that already exist, they have to do what the employers, who are more like dictators, say, so that their fiefdoms continue to run. But what if we didn't need a lot of dictators? And the truth is, we really don't. If you look at a sophisticated economy, such as the Japanese economy, where 30% of the gross national product, measured fiscally, comes from exports, and another 30% or so represents gift giving within the economy, about the same amount that are actually, I think it's a little bit more than Americans spend every year on legal fees and lawsuits. Federations, the Federation world is a world of lawsuits and conflict, but the Japanese world is a world of construction, export, and pragmatic friendliness. Barbados used to also be a place of pragmatic friendliness, and for some people it still is. Some people are so pragmatically friendly, some people not so much. Um, by contrast, China is a place that is known for being extremely rude, pragmatic but rude. Um, so China is basically taking over from America in the top spot as people who get shit done by being assholes. Um, However, China is very, as a country, still very different from the Federation because China isn't at war with anyone. Not even Japan, even though they've been spatting over a few islands, and the Chinese and Japanese have a long history of um, conflict, which seems ironic to the rest of the world, right? But yeah. Anyhow, um, getting back to Donald Trump and his poverty. And no, it's not. I'm just using Donald Trump because he's in the news now. But a lot of rich people have these same mentalities. They literally go to school and are taught this. Not necessarily formal school, but um, through interacting with other rich people who have the same philosophy. And I keep saying, I make the mistake of calling him rich because everybody else does, but he isn't rich. He's cash plenty, but he's poor, right? Because anybody who's destructive isn't rich, right? Being rich means that you have three things: health, wealth, and virtue. Virtue is what is used for both healing and growth and development. It's like a form of water. You can pour virtue out, you can pour it into a container, and actually, when you pour it into the container of your soul, that's how your mind, your body, and your network all become refreshed. By your network, I mean your social network, your spiritual network, and your temporal network. We all have at least two temporal networks, one in the present and one in the future. So, when we in the esoteric schools talk about homework, we are not actually talking about stuff that a teacher has assigned you in the class that you're doing at home. We talk about looking in the future, realizing what you need to prepare for the future, and going into your private domain, which is your home, in order to do the work to be prepared for that future that you've foreseen. And how do you foresee the future? Well, everybody does. You say, well, I'm going to get paid on Friday because there's a contract that says you're going to get paid on Friday, and because your boss has a reputation of paying you on time and according to contract. If it was that your boss was unreliable, you would say, well, I don't even know if I'm going to get paid on Friday. And then people ask you, well, why are you working for that boss? If you're in a place like Barbados, people will say, well, you know how it is, you know, hard to get a job. It's like 40% unemployment. But, if you're in a place like America where, jobs are easy to find and to create, you might say, oh, hey, that's a good point. I don't need to take this. I can move on. But if you, for example, didn't if you were of the wrong skin color, or which nowadays apparently is a Spanish speaking skin color, it's not really a skin color anymore, it's now language. So if you happen to be of Mexican origin or speaking Spanish as a first language, and you don't have certain papers, then I guess you could be deported. Um, if you don't accept unreliable work or low class work that pays little and has high hazards and low safety. So of course, if you're doing hazardous work for low pay, your future is at risk because you could lose a limb or something on the job, or you could lose your life on the job. And also, even if everything goes well in terms of safety, you're not sure about how much you're getting paid, or you're you're sure that you're not going to be able to save up enough money to carry yourself forwards in life. So, of course, some people put hope in the next generation, that the next generation will be able to do better, and they put all their plans and so on towards that next generation in terms of their children. And that's quite noble in itself. But the thing is, if you're going to set an example, you should set a great example. And what everybody would like to do is to bring themselves up to the level where they want to be, and then set that example, whether it be for children, future generations, people around their own age group, their peers, etc. In other words, you want to lead the field, and you also want to have an entourage who also has a similar mentality. We're the type of people who grow and develop despite challenges. Now, people who are already at a level of what Rich Dad calls super rich, such as Donald Trump, they they don't need to meet any challenges anymore. They don't need to develop any further. There's no fiscal challenges to them, at least. So they can therefore express now the self which may have been hidden on their way up because they just wanted to get to a point where they are independently wealthy. And at the point where you're independently wealthy, then you can say whatever you want to say because your finances are not on the threat. But if you have no virtues, then you can't bring those out. If you have, so I'm not saying Trump has absolutely no virtue, but what I am saying is that the whole concept of destroying people in order to make your life better never works. Whether you do it physically, such as what the so-called terrorists do, or what a war does to both sides, um, or whether you do it fiscally or by putting barriers to progress in the way of other people, other countries, other social groups. The original word for ghetto was created to describe what Hitler did to the Jews, cordon them off and keep them in an area where they couldn't get out so that they could be depressed economically. And they did that because they thought that the Jews had too much money and you should take it away by force and then the German people will be okay. So nowadays, the German people are complaining that Google has all their information and they don't really even they don't have a good concept of how to plan the German economy. So they have all these factories and so on, but they don't really have a lot of coordination or a lot of a overlooking view. They don't have a good strategy for dealing with the future. Um, and you can only have an overlooking view and a strategy for dealing with the future if you have that long-term planning and if you push that way. Um, so that's one of the things that perhaps Hitler promised to give the German people, and one of the reasons why he was able to rise to power legally. In the same way, Trump can easily rise to power by saying, well, in the long term, things will be better. You'll have more jobs, you won't have to worry about people taking away your jobs and stuff like that. But the whole concept of relying on somebody at top to take care of you, it goes against the whole concept of independence. If you want to be independent, you want to create an environment which fosters people to be able to reach to the stage where they want to be. If that is a high stage where they have lots of resources and where they have lots of people working with them, then that's good. If it's a relatively modest stage where they're basically doing contract work, short-term contract work, but they're able to not only meet their living requirements in terms of housing, food, and so on, but they're also able to save towards better education, better housing, um, travel, whatever they're interested in, then you can say that the economic system is working to give you the a better life, both now and in the future. And focusing on things like immigration and supposed immigrant terrorists ignores the real issues that are oppressing people every day. Most underage people in the US or in the Federation have a worse quality of life than underage people in Barbados. And that's because in Barbados we are not trained to suppress the spirit of a human being by using extreme ageism and also um, trying to overly inhibit young people from finding out about the full facets of life. In Japan is even further because there are formal procedures to make sure everybody is educated. For example, get some young sexual education in terms of the pragmatic aspects of sexual education without any bias at a young age and so on. There would be a problem with bias in most societies because most societies shy away from the reality that we all have a sexual origin. Yet, this is a relatively recent thing in terms of human history. Most societies have always been more down to earth, but society nowadays is up in the sky and in the net. So I say society right now is in Skynet. Um, in Terminator movies, they view Skynet as like some sort of military project gone wild. But in reality, the way that people use their brain tends to make their brain subject to malware or malicious cognitive patterns. These malicious cognitive patterns may appear only to affect other people, for example, hating immigrants, but they actually affect you, for example, hating immigrants, because the hate is what affects you. The hate takes up space where love should be, where kindness should be, where gentleness should be, where joyfulness should be, where creativity should be, where the seeds of growth and development should be. So you spend all this time and energy hating, you don't have time to therefore love, to make love, to do anything that you love, to enjoy life. So eventually you deplete all of your positive energy and negative energy takes over. And not only that, but as you interact with other people, you deplete them as well. So you would find that people may interact with you if they know that they're going to get money from you, which is why Trump is would always have people interacting with him because he's the figurehead and they're basically making money with him. But again, this money isn't real money. This money is cash, but time is money. In other words, real money is dominated in time. It isn't actually dominated in cash, in fiat currency, gold-backed currency, silver-backed currency, any sort of currency. Tying currency to metal doesn't give it more value. It's still the same bullshit. So cash is used primarily as a means of exchange and of storing value. However, that is no longer true. It hasn't been true since maybe at least in mid 1940s when the International Federal Reserve System was created. So again, I go back to this concept of federation. So in Barbados, for example, we don't have a federal bank, we have a central bank. Um, there are several attempts to create federations within the Caribbean and such forth. But I think that before you start talking about federations, you have to understand what a federation is, where the power is, and why it's unnecessary in this day and age. Because we're not living in a day and age where nation states matter as much as they used to. Nation states do matter, but every nation state is comprised of people, and all of those people have a certain value which shows where they will compromise their role, not necessarily compromise their ethics, but compromise their role in serving the nation state. So if you want to get into a country, it's just a matter of how much it will cost you to get into that country. And you may not need to denominate that in cash, you may need to denominate that in time and in connections. If you're well connected, of course, you can travel well. So many people look at the superficial game which is played by diplomats and so on representing nation states because they believe that hierarchies still dominate the world. They believe that if you have a nation state, you may not have a king, but you may have a president, you may have a prime minister, and they believe, well, this is the most important person. Everybody else comes under them. However, if you look at things from a Martian perspective, where an individual is the center of the universe, then you have obviously a multitude of universes all moving around and interacting with each other. This is quite similar to the concept of being born a king, and then it's up to you if you fall from grace or if you continue being a king. In some of the light worker stuff, they call it being born an avatar. But it is actually related to the ancient concept of how in China they used to appoint the next emperor. But I'm not going to go into that right now because that's sort of besides the point. What is on point is that a king is a person who discovers how the world works and they utilize this to create a strong city. Now, a strong city is both in their mind and both spread out around the world in their connections with others. So nowadays we wouldn't call it a strong city. Nowadays we would call it a corporation or a transnational corporation or something like that. Now, many people, for some reason, seem to think that corporations are big and evil, and that all big corporations are evil, and that being big makes them evil and stuff like that. Well, I don't think Goliath was evil because he was big. He was just evil because he was evil. And being big allowed him to grow his evil more, and also to become arrogant enough that he was eventually killed by somebody who he, by his logic, should have been able to take out easily. I think one version of the myth says that he was shot in the head because he took off his helmet in arrogance. Like, hey, I don't even need a helmet to talk to you, or let me take off my helmet and show you my face. And David was like, okay, cool, right between the eyes. So, um, my point here, though, getting back to my point, that the poverty of Donald Trump is not something you should let infect you. Don't become poor by trying to destroy any group, even somebody. I mean, I hear so many destructive and not judgmental, condemning. Because it's good to have judgment. It's good to be able to know, how things should be. It's bad to condemn others because when you condemn others, you don't give them a chance to grow. And not only that, but I often hear people condemning other people for things which they themselves either have done or are doing or will do in the future. And it is all pointless rabble rabble. But it serves the point of destroying you and feeding the malware or the malicious cognitive pattern which is within you. Now, in ancient times, we used to call these, or in times of the Greeks, used to call that process demonization when it became extreme. That's when someone is only acting under demons rather than over demons. Humans are supposed to control the demons within them. And we all have demons because that's how we learn how to walk. When you want to walk from point A to point B, you don't study and say, let me lean forward a little bit in the chair, let me put my feet flat, let me push up using this particular muscle and that particular muscle, let me make sure to balance as I stand up, let me put one foot in front of the other, let me shift weight from the left to the right. You don't think any of that consciously because a daemon does it for you. And the daemon, a resident daemon, is an unconscious cognitive pattern. So the natural way to develop demons is through practice, obviously. That's how we all learn to walk, through practice. And some people call it trial and error, but the important thing is practice, and it's also something that you did over a prolonged period of time, and it's also something you did with the certainty that you would learn eventually. That's why everybody learns to walk. We don't normally even think about it, because by the time you know the word for walk, you're already walking. By the time you know the word for confidence, you've already exhibited perfect confidence in learning how to walk without even knowing the word for it. So you don't need language to learn. You've already learned without language. However, what language can do is stop you from learning. Language can be used to encode patterns of cognitive behavior which retard you. That's why some people say that, well, this guy's illiterate, but he's so wise. And they may marvel at that. But truth and in fact, being literate is important because being literate allows you to work with external memory rather than only internal memory. And sometimes it's important to be able to actually bypass internal memory until you can correct a problem in internal memory. At this point, we're getting more into advanced healing techniques, which are needed in counterintelligence and so forth. So I won't focus on that because that still remains an esoteric area and also remains a rather rare area that most people probably don't have any interest in. Yeah, and this isn't the Born Legacy or something like that where we're trying to educate people about what is possible and what should be done if you want to survive in times when law is lawless. So I think I'll just go listen to some gorillas, and there's almost a half an hour of ranting. So I think that's more than enough. Um, I would like to probably listen over to this and make it a lot shorter because I could obviously cover most of the points in less than 10 minutes. But I probably wouldn't do that for a while, so I'm left with the decisions whether to upload this as it is or whether to just leave it on my hard drive, probably forgotten for years, like so many other things. Um, so maybe I'll do both upload as it is and still forget it for a while. Certainly, it will be less relevant after the American elections are finished. But I'm not trying to be popular or to shape the world with my opinions. But this is something that has been on my mind for a while, and it dovetails with some of the work I'm doing in terms of educating future generations of self and others. Because generations, although I said that generations represented physical children, they don't only represent physical children. You could also interpret the word generations to mean anything that you generate as a living human being. In other words, your plans, what you say to people, what you do to people, what you generate during your day to day, moment to moment living also counts as generations. So plans for prosperity also count as children, especially when you look at Psalms 127, for example. All right, well, that's it for now. I must say, going to the gym every day was a brilliant idea, so I'm glad me and my brother came up with that. It's been going well, and in 2016, look out for lots more stuff coming from me. Probably through Vimeo rather than YouTube, but whatever. In the meantime, you can check out the blog and read the back post there later.